The 5-day introspection meeting of Uganda's ambassadors abroad kicks off tomorrow at the Civil Service College in Jinja amid a ton of bad optics that have for long spells marred the once coveted foreign service. The bad optics took a turn this week with the Canadian government throwing out Joy Ruth Acheng as Uganda's High Commissioner in Ottawa over uncouth behaviour. The scandal came against the backdrop of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs contending with revelations in July by the Daily Monitor newspaper that senior officials sanctioned operations of a casino business at Uganda's Consulate in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates in contravention of the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations that sets out the framework for establishment, maintenance and termination of diplomatic relations between states. Uganda's foreign spy agency, the External Security Organization, is currently looking into the casino matter, while several individuals involved have since recorded statements with police's Criminal Investigations Directorate. The Consul General, Henry Mayaga, who previously served as Deputy Ambassador at the main embassy in the United Arab Emirates capital Abu Dhabi, has since been recalled to the ministry's headquarters for consultations. Well, these diplomatic gaffes are not entirely new nor peculiar to Uganda. In Uganda's foreign service, they have become a norm, while the perpetrators usually go away with their sins or get a slap on the wrist. For instance, weeks before Canadian authorities threw out Ambassador Acheng this week, there were conversations of cross-transferring her to Uganda's High Commissioner in Canberra, Australia, and switching the High Commissioner in Canberra, Dorothy Hua, to Canada. Whether this will materialize or not is yet to be seen. However, it is unlikely the Australian authorities will allow Ambassador Acheng because, as a practice, Western countries usually compare notes on due diligence on foreign diplomats. A case in point, in 2016, Canadian authorities rejected the cross-transfer of a senior diplomat from next door at the embassy in New York, where the said diplomat had been thrown out on domestic violence charges.
The ongoing problem in Canada and in the UAE, in my view, is a small storm in a teacup. It is something that can be easily addressed. These are individuals that erred in their responsibilities and not institutions that made mistakes. Were it the institution of our embassy that was being questioned, or the institution of our UAE that was being questioned, and not the individuals, then I would be concerned. If our image is to be impacted, then our embassy will be asked to close down.
Most of these ambassadors don't actually portray that excellency title in terms of their conduct. They actually think they are representing Mr. Museveni or any other as a political party. They disregard all other nationals, be it Ugandans or other nationals. An ambassador must listen and must only communicate through the non-diplomatic channels, be it diplomatic notices, the written and verbal notices. The ambassadors we have can speak as politicians anywhere. They can speak without consultation. They can speak their own ego than national interests. That's one of the challenges, but it emanates from the fact that these are political appointees.
Prior to being named High Commissioner in 2017, Ambassador Acheng, a Uganda People's Congress stalwart, had earlier in 2015 pledged to support President Museveni without officially crossing to the ruling NRM party. Then in 2016, she was named State Minister for Fisheries during the cabinet reshuffle that year, but her name was later withdrawn. For the Canadians, according to diplomatic sources, the waiver of Ambassador Acheng's diplomatic credentials and ultimate designation as persona non grata, meaning the said person is unwelcome or unacceptable, was after months of patiently waiting either for her to reform or the Ugandan government to withdraw her. Months earlier, sources indicated that Canadian authorities penned a 7-page diplomatic protest note to her superiors in Kampala asking diplomatically for her removal, which warnings the Kampala regime either missed or deliberately ignored. The misbehaviors included, among others, those of her adult children, her conduct turning the embassy into the ruling NRM outpost, confrontation with the opposition National Unity Platform supporters.
I believe that Museveni's government is doing a great thing in Uganda. I believe that.
In the streets and in closed-door meetings, and the February raising down of the official residence, Estako House, which had heritage protection under Canadian laws, to be replaced by an 8-storied structure in the upscale Rockcliffe Park neighborhood. The unproved demolition Canadian Broadcasting Corporation (CBC) first reported on February 9th infuriated both area residents and local authorities who moved legal action to the construction company contracted. While the embassy enjoys diplomatic immunity from such legal action under the 1961 Vienna Convention, for Ambassador Acheng, this was another dent. The State Minister for International Affairs, Henry Okello Oryem, in an interview with NTV on Tuesday, regretted such incidents.
I am very proud of our international image, in spite of the problems we've had in Canada and the UAE. We in the region and in Africa, we are rated very highly, and internationally we're rated very highly and respected international community for our diplomatic achievements and both internally and externally in many areas.
He, however, said the discretion of appointment of ambassadors lies with the president.
We move forward. There's a need for investigation to be thorough investigation to be made to get at the bottom of what resulted in those. In this case, what happened in this particular case for the Ambassador Acheng to be, asked to leave Canada, and what happened in the UAE has to be investigated. Lessons have to be learned. And by this investigation, we will have lessons that we will learn, and those lessons will help us guide and take action in the future to make sure that we do not fall into the same trap.
The Opposition Cabinet Foreign Affairs Minister Harun Mwanda Kunyinji told NTV that the continued appointment of particularly NRM election losers as ambassadors is an extension of the impunity normalized locally.
All the postings I've seen of ambassadors, 95% are political appointees. We don't have career diplomats appointed or promoted. There is no known criteria of how someone can apply to become an ambassador or how they are appointed. They just get a list from the executive that these are the ambassadors. And many times the same list find their way in diplomatic service. Now, the challenge with these political appointees, they fail to understand that diplomacy is a profession as well and has distinct expectations. And many times, most of these political appointees tend to serve the appointing authority as Mr. Museveni, not the country called Uganda. So they many times think they are in politics as usual.
He said the country's foreign service is in dire need of soul searching.
But the lack of a codified foreign policy. The last time I checked in Parliament, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was promising that they will come up with a draft subject to approval by the executive. The executive has not come out to say they have such a draft or has approved any draft. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, as we speak, probably relies on particular segments of the constitutional framework to copy and paste wherever they are required to account and demonstrate what Uganda stands for in terms of foreign relations.
The Ottawa mission itself had for long been a spectacle. The mission has only one career foreign service officer, while the rest are appointees from here and there, including a senior minister's husband and a son to another cabinet minister and an NRM historical. The son of the cabinet minister has been in the past for nearly a decade, going against the routine of rotating around diplomatic staff. In September last year, as President Museveni celebrated 79 years at a bash organized at Kololo Independence Grounds in Kampala, Uganda's High Commission in Ottawa threw a parallel cake-cutting revelry to mark the same. In fact, the mission had come to be known for routinely crusading for the interests of the ruling NRM party rather than the country.
Well, some may be political appointees, but if they are well coached and trained after appointment, we would have some value from any appointment. But we don't have a diplomatic training institute. The last time I inquired through Parliament from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, when they had just appointed these virtual ambassadors who are facing trouble and the whole lot, the Minister of Foreign Affairs only claimed that they are in Chianquans. Now in Chianquans, they only go for military training. And and probably some patriotism lessons. But when it comes to diplomacy, these are unique sectors. These are unique lessons. These are unique deliverables. So we don't have a diplomatic training institute. These diplomats are not trained, and they have no refresher courses.
Whereas the appointment of ambassadors is a prerogative of the president, critics argue that the country is reaping from President Museveni's continued turning of the once coveted foreign service as a dumping ground for loyal cadres and political rejects as ambassadors. Add to the mix the rampant nepotism and cronyism, that is, the staffing of sons and daughters and relatives of the politically connected in appointment and posting of lower-rank foreign service officers to the embassies, and the perennial inadequate funding that has constipated work plans. While employment of non-career diplomats as ambassadors is a widespread practice globally, many inside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs concur that many of the president's appointees are an effective cocktail. The result has been an endless supply of stories and complaints of heightened tensions and mutual mistrust between this collection of bossy politicians installed as supervisors and seasoned diplomats or embassy staff who, on the other hand, feel they are more competent. Officially, ambassadors' work around the world is cut out. Represent the country politically and lobby for investment, trade and tourism. Differences in bilateral relations and the peculiar nature of partnership with the country may inform a president's choice on who to deploy as an ambassador. In Uganda's case, there seems to be no formula. On average, it takes a career diplomat about 18 years of technical service to raise to the level of ambassador. This means one should join on merit and raise through the ranks from a foreign service officer, that is third secretary, second secretary, first secretary, counselor, minister counselor, to become an ambassador, picking up vast knowledge through deployment at different desks needed for negotiation and presentation skills. Analysis of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs records indicates that the ministry has a larger number of staff on short contracts than general staff. For Q1 July to September releases for this financial year, the ministry is spending 752 million shillings on salaries of general staff and slightly more 824 million shillings on contract staff, a classic case of spending more on militias than the actual troops. The maintenance of many retired, albeit senior staff on contracts, add to the cocktail of nepotism and cronyism, means there is hardly no room for promotion of both career staff and lower-rank foreign service officers. This has lowered morale of many career officers, some of whom have gone for 15 years without promotion.
For the case of Uganda, you find an ambassador at a mission for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That also builds impunity. Otherwise, when it comes to the practice in other countries, is that the ambassadors are posted for 2 years, you are returned at the head office for 1 year or 2 years, then posted again. It's a rotation exercise. But the kind of diplomats we have, they are posted forever.
The fallout is not only abroad. Inside the ministry headquarters in Kampala, relations are fraught between the senior minister, General J.J. Odongo, and his deputy, Okello Oryem, and on the other hand, General Odongo and the top technocrat, Vincent Bajire. Meanwhile, some of the country's key diplomatic outposts remain vacant, among others next door in Nairobi, one of Uganda's biggest trading partner, Iran, and technically Kinshasa, where the DR Congo president, Felix Tshisekedi, has for 3 years snubbed Uganda's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, Farid Kalisa, for 3 years. The snubbing of Ambassador Kalisa to formally present his credentials, as is the customary practice, meaning he's either unsuitable or Congo has serious issues with the Kampala regime, means he cannot work effectively in Kinshasa, nor in Cameroon, Central African Republic, Congo-Brazzaville, and Gabon. This as the ministry is saddled with reports of selling diplomatic notes to private individuals and the politically connected to fasten visa issuance by particularly the United States and European Union countries in Kampala. Some officials are also cited in the sale of countries' diplomatic passports anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000.
Of course, I've also seen another concern. There's intrigue and conflict within a number of these missions. You find that some of these ambassadors are not in tandem with the other diplomatic staff. There's a lot of intrigue and infighting within most of these missions, partly because the transfers are not done regularly. You find the ambassador is at war with the staff, with the deputy. In most of these missions I've discovered.
Particularly, the constant power struggles and fights have fractured work relations among staff at several missions, even where specific cases are unknown. In Brussels, Belgium, the embassy is in debt of 170,000 euros or 698 million shillings due to financial impropriety, and embassy staff are routinely bickering over the meager resources. The lucrative proposed construction project for the ambassador's residence along Plot 35 close to Delorias has further left the embassy staff divided bitterly over how and who cashes in. Across the Atlantic in Washington, D.C., a key mission where President Museveni in 2021 assigned Greenhorn Robbie Kakonge, the embassy is on matchstick away from implosion. In Ankara, Turkey, Rome, Italy, Paris, France, in London, United Kingdom, Algiers in Algeria, there is trouble brewing at many Ugandan embassies abroad.
When it comes to equally the appointment of foreign service staff, it also has several questions. For example, it is public deployment, but it is rare to hear that there is an advert for recruitment of foreign service staff. You know, all these embassies, they employ foreign service staff from Uganda who are sent to those other countries. What we hear, you only find that they exist. But in terms of appointment, and even whenever we are questioning their policy statements, it must ordinarily show the employment gap and the recruitment plan.
During the last decade, the ministry has prioritized economic and commercial diplomacy with each of the country's 38 diplomatic missions, embassies and consulates, given key performance indicators to meet, but the failure to match the same with funding has rendered implementation problematic. Economic and commercial diplomacy, or ECD, relates with the embassies attracting foreign direct investment, attracting trade and tourism from all over the world as part of the implementation of the National Development Plan, the blueprint to drive Uganda into a middle-class income country now in its third phase. For this financial year, the ministry has prioritized the embassies in London, New Delhi, Kuala Lumpur, Washington, Beijing, Paris, Abu Dhabi, Ankara, Algiers, Doha, Guangzhou, and Mombasa. Diplomacy is primarily about rule following and protocol enforcement. In a rapidly changing geopoliticized world, many countries are appointing their best and finest for the coveted ambassadorial positions to navigate, outmaneuver, and outsmart competition. By many accounts, Uganda is doing the reverse and as such, reaping what it is sowing.